Welcome to the Global Missions Podcast. I'm Maggie, and we are so excited to have John Darnell back with us today. John serves as the CEO of Global Outreach International. And over the last couple of months, we reached out to hundreds of missionaries to ask them, what do you wish your churches knew? What do you want them to understand, but you just aren't sure how to say it? We gained a ton of insight for this episode, and we're glad to be sharing some of what we learned with you here today. And if you find conversations like this useful or encouraging, then we'd love for you to subscribe wherever you're listening. We've titled this episode, After Those Precious Conversations, What Your Missionaries Wish You Knew. Welcome back to the Global Missions Podcast, John. It is so good to have you. Thanks for being with us today.
I appreciate you having me back.
Well, we talked about this episode initially, and we worked through the feedback that we had received from missionaries, and we found 4 basic themes or suggestions that you have for the church. Do you want to introduce the first one?
Sure, and I want to give a little bit of framing and offer a caveat, because when you start thinking about here's what the missionary would want to say to the church, I think anybody that's been around missionaries, now there's different types of missionaries, okay? And some might be a little grumpy towards the church in general, deserved or undeserved. And our heart, Maggie, as you and I prayed for this episode, as we thought, I was like, Lord, let's be positive. Because we think the church, we're proud of the church. We know people, they're listening to this because they love missionaries and they want to help. And so we're just jumping and diving into this saying, hey, we think you're doing a great job, and we want to frame this in a positive way that you can latch on to and with some really practical tips. So I just want to make sure our heart, your heart, Maggie, my heart comes through before we get to some of the stories and some of the things we have to say. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, and the first rule of thumb.
And the first one, without further ado, is stay connected. Stay connected. You know, this is one of the biggest challenges when you move anywhere, you know, and it's relationships change. If you left your church in, you know, I live in North Mississippi and I moved somewhere else, there's going to be this challenge, this relational strain. The people that I was in touch with, I'm not anymore. And I just want people to stay connected to the people that they send.
So what does it look like for a church to stay connected in really small but really meaningful ways?
So I think about, there's a couple of things happening, because you have the church life that continues on without the person. And then the person in the field, the missionary in the field, they're building a new life. And that's creating a distance in just their day to day. And I think about some of the most meaningful things that we experienced when we were on the field. This is so funny. You remember Skype?
Yeah, I can still hear the song.
How they did not just conquer the market at Zoom over to, I'll never understand how they lost that battle being 20 years ahead. But my pastor used to reach out to us to check on us. He would leave me like a video voicemail on Skype, okay? And this would have been about 15 years ago. But since we were learning Spanish in Latin America, he would use like Google Translate or something, put a message in Spanish and read it to me in like the worst, most gringo Spanish ever. But you know what? It was like he wanted to check on me in his own unique, funny way. He was checking on me and wanted me to know that we were being thought of. You know, that's a funny one, but just a message, you know, reaching out. I would think even more meaningful is, Maggie, this gets harder the longer that someone's on the field. People change at a church. Leadership changes at a church. So all of a sudden, you have this couple in the field. They've been in the field 5 years, and they don't even know some of the staff members. And I'll share a story about that. Sarah, somebody on our team, she was in Costa Rica for 15 years, she and her family. And she told me about, they've been on the field about 5 years. And the women's ministry director at their sending church in the States left, so a new ministry director came in, and she reached out to Sarah to get to know her personally. She mailed her the book that the women's ministry was going to be going through. She said, hey, wanted you to know what we're working through, what we're praying through as the church. And it's like, what a way to make them feel included. Because I think sometimes we have a discomfort with, I don't want them to feel left out, so I'm not going to send them that because they can't come to the Bible. I don't want them to feel left out, so not going to send them the wedding invitation. I'm not going to send them the graduation invitation, the thing. And what we're doing is the opposite. By not even sending it to them, we're making it feel like, man, I don't even get the choice to participate. I don't even know what's going on. And now I feel even more isolated. So that was a really cool thing that Sarah experienced, but we can do this with any aspect of our life, just taking a moment and say, hey, let's send them that invitation. Let's send them that book that our classes are going through. Let's let them know what's happening at the church.
I agree. I had supporters who sent me their Christmas card every year that I was in Germany, and now every year that I'm in Canada. They're in Texas, so it's international posting no matter what. And I have them all. I have every single year, and they added kids along the way, and it's precious to me, and I save them because, I don't know, they're just those little pieces of normalcy. You wouldn't even question, like, of course you're going to send that to, or you'll hand it out to the people at your church. And I think just that little tiny sticky note on each one. Hey, Maggie, praying for you. I don't know. It just meant so much to me. So I agree. It's the ordinary things that can really help bridge that gap. I'm curious if you have any guidance for staying connected to the whole family, specifically the kids. So this isn't something that I ever had to navigate because I don't have children. But we just had a fantastic conversation on MKs a few episodes back about how they are often the unseen people group. So how can we help them be seen in this effort to stay connected?
I love this question. Something that we talk about here at Global Outreach is kids can unintentionally be the cans behind a just married car. So the scene I'm trying to paint there is we as the church cheering mom and dad on as if they're the bride and the groom in this scenario. Like, ooh, you got this great adventure ahead of you. We're pumped. You're rolling out of the church. We're, throwing rice at you or whatever. And the cans, it's like the kids are just drug along and beat up along the way. And so how can we as the church come alongside that family? It's still going to be hard, but it doesn't have to be that hard. They don't have to feel that isolated or forgotten. And so I think that's a really important question you're asking. Our director of missionary kids here at Global Outreach is my wife. So I asked her this morning, I was like, hey, what would you say to this question? And she said, the gatekeeper for this is the parent, as it should be. The gatekeeper for this is the parent. So if you have kids and, you're connected with this family, number one, a church could designate a family, one of their close families, and say, hey, we want you to think this out. At least monthly, make some sort of effort to communicate, whether it's an email and they're pen pals via email, or Marco Polo. I mean, we use that asynchronous communication really helps me a lot. But imagine, we let our kids sometimes, hey, send so-and-so a message, and it's going through the parents. So there's, good accountability in that way. But the kids are able, because they're 8 time zones apart or 12 time zones apart, lining up those phone calls is hard, but they're able to have those conversations. And now here, those are the simple things that you can do that I think will make a huge difference. The peak experience, just general missionary care wise, is some MKs shared with us recently that there were mission team members that would come, and some of them would actually sit and talk with the kids. Like, hey, you're the only thing that matters, not the thing that I came to do, not like, hey, I want to talk to your parents, go away, but you are who matters in this conversation. And they felt so special. And so how can you, because hopefully the church is listening to this or sending people to visit their missionary families, how can you make the kids feel special? And the biggest win of all, can you take a kid just to go play with that kid and see their life in that context? That's something we've tried to do with our kids for other missionary kids as we've traveled. And I know that's a huge ask, but I'm telling you, like, one of the biggest things you could do for that family.
That's a great suggestion. Let's keep moving on to our second best practice. This one was, I would say, we heard this the most consistently from the missionaries that we touched base with, and that was to stay curious. It came up in hundreds of different ways, but I'm wondering if you can unpack for us, what do you mean by stay curious?
I've noticed in my own life, one of the places I get myself most in trouble or people feel the least cared for is when I assume. And whether it's what my girls are going through, I have a high schooler, high school's not like it was 20 years ago when I was in high school. or it's been more than 20, Maggie, don't tell anybody. But, you know, so like this assuming is like, hey, I know what life's like. And so and you can't blame people if they've never been to the country or, been there, but how am I imposing my assumptions that church growth should work like church growth works in my context? Maybe I'm part of a big growing church and we send a missionaries like, well, how many people have joined y'all's church or y'all's Bible study? And asking in such a way where you're trying to ask about their ministry, but you're really just making them feel bad that they're not having the same fruit, or, like that ministry works that way. Another one, Maggie, I would say is the home is a complicated word. That's something that we hear a lot from missionaries, and we'd hear from, we moved back to the States after 5 years on the field, and people was like, I bet you're glad to be home. I was like, man, it's just not that easy, And so how can we bring curiosity instead of comparison to, just ask questions. Hey, what's your favorite thing about living there? What's the hardest thing about living there? How can I be praying for you? Just like open-ended, no judgment questions that allow people to share their lives and just let them share their heart. And I think that curiosity invites a connection and an opportunity that I would venture to say most missionaries are not going to get when they go back to the States or Canada to their sending church.
Actually, I'm glad you mentioned Canada, because I think especially in Canadian culture, we tend to be really reserved and we don't want to seem like we're overstepping or we're being intrusive. So I'm wondering if you have any encouragement for the Canadians listening to this. How can we stay curious out of care and know that it's like coming from the right place without accidentally being intrusive, and yet also being courageous to step into those kind of awkward, like gray spaces and say like, hey, but I do care about your experience. I want to hear. How would you encourage us?
What's funny is I feel like as a missionary in the field, the American experience is very different. We as Americans in hosting mission teams, we're so different. It's like we actually arrive thinking we know all the answers, and then we have it all figured out. And then the way that we do it is how everybody should do it. And so, to the American audience, I would say I remember picking up a team from the airport, and it was about an hour drive through these rice fields to where we did ministry, and so they're seeing houses on stilts that are cane houses. They're seeing, it was nothing like where they came from. Like, why do they do that? And why don't they do it this way? And we'd solved all of Ecuador's problems before, we even made it to the ministry side. It was incredible. And so to that audience, I would say, hey, take a deep breath and observe and don't judge. Just let them be opportunities to arouse interest. To a more reserved audience, I would say, asking good, open-ended questions is how a lot of missionaries feel cared for. So to the Canadian audience, I would say, like, one of the ways that you're not being intrusive, if you say, hey, what's your guys' biggest challenge right now? Or if you say, hey, what are some of the biggest dreams you have? Like, just in general. I'm telling you, I was on the field 4.5 years before someone asked me that. I'm not exaggerating. And when they did, and I got to share my heart, I was like, wow. Well, I realized I hadn't been dreaming. One, that was a red flag, and I had to work through that. But, it's like, wow, this person really cared because they asked me and allowed me to share my heart. So that would be my encouragement. It's not intrusive. It's a way to show care.
Yeah, I'll expose some of my own ignorance in this by sharing. It was just a couple of years ago that I realized asking a missionary, hey, how are you praying for your neighbors and for the people that you're reaching out to? Because in newsletters, I think, or in like more official missionary to church communications, they'll give you a list of like, here are the prayer requests. Could you pray for our visa? Can you pray for our church and this Bible study that's starting and things like that? And then I I went on the field and realized, oh, I pray differently for the people around me than I ask other people to pray for. And it's because I know these people. And there's an intimacy and a relationship there that just doesn't always translate into the newsletter. Anyways, when I made that connection, I started asking that to missionaries. I could not believe it. Just took us a layer deeper so quickly to say, hey, what's on your heart about these things? Or like, where are you seeing the Lord like just tug you in deeper? And it was a really sweet one for me. So that's one that I love to ask missionaries, because I'm always just blown away by their insight and the depths of their heart for these people that they're working with. And I love that question. So I'll pass it on to all of you. It feels so obvious.
That is so well. Now, thank you for that for me, because I think that's an absolutely amazing. Well, and it's so different. I love it you're sharing that, because it's so different than just how can I be praying for you, which we should be asking missionaries. But like, hey, how are you praying for your neighbors? How are you praying for your city? Because that's going to that's a different way to ask it. That's going to be more. I love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So our third rule is to stay consistent. What kinds of consistency should we be striving for as we seek to support our missionaries?
Yes, man. And it's certainly connected to the first two, but I think even more practical. It is really busy on the mission field, and it's also really busy in the United States. And there are different kinds of busy and overwhelmed for different reasons. I'm assuming people in Canada are busy too. So that's my assumption. Now, so it's easy to see the new monthly newsletter come digitally. Some people still in the States mail newsletters out. I encourage people to do that, because it actually sits on my counter longer than me seeing it in my email. So it's a pro tip, it's good. So, answer the email back. And do so and don't be offended if the missionary doesn't respond. And that's something, as you and I were praying and thinking through this episode, even say, hey, you don't have to reply to this, but I want I've prayed for the 4 things you've listed in this, and I'm so excited for what God's doing. And just be a broken record. We had one lady that would email us back, and they weren't financial donors. They were just people we knew from church. But we felt more encouraged because she was so, every time we sent an email update out, she would respond, and she would write us back, and she would let us know that she's praying. And that level of consistency as an individual, if you're an individual listening to this, write the missionaries back, let them know you've prayed for the things that they list in the newsletter, pray for. At the corporate church level, I think there's things you can do consistently to put the missionaries in front of the church and help them be top of mind. I know our missions pastor had a Wednesday night prayer group, and monthly he would reach out. It's like, hey, our missions prayer team is getting together, and we want to know how to be praying for you guys. And they would pray for us regardless if we answered them or not. But they were thinking, and they were consistently monthly. Another one that it's pretty cool, and the technology's come a long way even in the last 10 years since we were on the field. But the live Zoom or the video in front of the congregation thing, where like at a very basic level, reminding the greater congregation that these people exist and we have sent them out, is huge. Like, think about that as a church. Like, man, we could Zoom them in on Mission Sunday or the first Sunday of the month, or show a video and prayer update, and just getting their faces on the screen, handing out their prayer cards out the door, just like remind people these missionaries exist. And that's the consistency. It's not, maybe persistent might be, just stay all over this to remind people that we have sent these people out, and you have to be consistent to do that.
Yeah, I think I love what you said about responding to newsletters. I think something that people don't realize is a newsletter isn't just like an email that you sit down and write one night. You're taking photos all month, and you're trying to keep track of like, oh, I want to be able to tell people that this prayer request was answered, Or I think for me, something that was really humbling was like, hey, it's month number 7 and I'm going to ask for you to pray for this yet again. Like, and some people I know, that's like, it's year number 7 and we're still praying for our landlord, you know? And so I think having that awareness that a monthly newsletter isn't just like a softball that missionaries are sending back to the churches of like, well, here's the low hanging fruit. It's like usually a pretty like, it is one of the hardest things to do, and it can feel really vulnerable to be honest. And you're, you know, here's what we did this month, and I hope that you're excited by your investment in the field, and this is what it looks like, and then just crickets back, you know. Like I'll send my newsletter back, and I'll usually get responses from 3 to 5 people, and those 3 to 5 people are like my cherished. I'm like, thank you so much. Thank you. This means so much to me. So I think it's such a small thing, but it matters so much.
It does. And to peel the layer back a little bit more on that newsletter, you're exactly right. It's like, these people are giving money. What do they expect in terms of outcomes? And how can I show them that, I mean, all I've done is try to learn language and culture for 3 months. So what do I put in my newsletter? And are they going to keep giving? And I wrestle all month and then I send it. And I sent it to 500 people and no one emailed me back, or one person did. And then I'm like, that's the devil's playground. Psychologically, it was like, I'm alone and nobody loves me and I'm not doing enough. And, you know, it just becomes this struggle. And so just, hey, you can fix a lot of that. Just hit reply. Not reply all, please. Don't hit reply all. Don't hit reply all, but hit reply and reach back.
Or, you know, hit reply all and start a trend.
That's right. Do it, everybody. Let everybody know you're praying.
No, I think that's great. We had 2 different responses that came in as we were touching base with lots of different missionaries. And one of them that really stood out, I was like, oh, I got to remember that phrasing. That's such a good way to explain it. One of them said, ministry happens on the mission field at the same speed that it happens at home. And I was like, that is such a great way to land that for believers who are still in North America of like, hey, did you bring 8 people to your Bible study this month? Okay, well then that's probably not a realistic expectation. And it might go even slower depending on where they are. And the other thing was from a newer missionary. They've only been on the field for a handful of years. And they said, I don't know how to explain how exhausting the transition here has been, learning a new language, learning to operate in a completely foreign context. And I love getting your messages. I just don't have any more energy at the end of the day to reply. But like, please keep sending them. And I just was like, my heart went out to them. I was like, that is such a real experience. And it's, I think, more common than we often know how to talk about in the missions world, is just like, hey, I've got nothing left in the tank, but that doesn't mean that you didn't just deposit a little bit into my tank. So thank you for reaching out, you know? Anyways, those 2 missionaries, if you're listening, if you came back to this episode, thank you for that insight, because I thought that was really, really great. Do you have any further ideas on staying consistent before we move on?
I think you nailed it. I mean, I think with those, especially those last things, just reply with no expectation and do it every time you see it. It'll be a huge blessing.
So finally, this brings us to staying compassionate then. Why is compassion so important in our relationships with missionaries?
Oh man, I tell you, and for me, having lived in the States for 10 years now and being in the office, I can fail in this regard. I can forget how it was, and even more so if someone's never lived it. Just, you're not aware of the cost, right? So the costs we're aware of, we often express like, oh yeah, we know so and so, this is the typical story we tell about them, right? They sold everything, they left, you know, they took their kids, and we think that's the cost. Well, that's like the startup cost, you know, to do what they're wanting to do. But man, the ongoing cost of, I asked some of our missionary care team about, hey, what would you say, like, I'm a guy on the mission field, I have one experience, but ladies, what has your experience been? And one of them shared, I was a mom homeschooling on the field, and my husband was out doing ministry. We joined him sometimes, but in a lot of ways, it was a huge sacrifice because I had to give up my independence. I couldn't drive. I couldn't take care of myself. And I thought, Lord, is this all there is? I could be homeschooling in the States. And so, like, there was this struggle of, man, you don't really know just like how hard it is in that grind, feeling isolated and not even feeling like you're part of the ministry, really is huge. Another one said for single women on the field, like she said, John, a lot of times when I make the decision to follow Jesus in this way and move abroad, like I'm not at church in the young singles ministry anymore. The eligible bachelor pool is gone and I'm on the field. And like every day I'm on the field, it is a conscious decision like, Lord, I might be giving up marriage to serve you in this way. And so like people, the reason we stay compassionate is we don't know the burdens that people are carrying. We don't know what they're wrestling with and the longings of their heart. And that following Jesus it was, so much more than just moving. Yeah, that was hard too, but it was just so much more than that. And people are going through so much. And so when we see, I think sometimes we can fall into the trap of get on Facebook and we see, this picture in the Andes Mountains or with the Maasai in Kenya. And we as an American can see they're living this exotic life. Oh, it must be great to be on vacation all the time, which I've gotten that feedback before. Like we can bring some judgment into it. It's just like, hey, pause, repent, and pray. And you don't know what they're going through. And that the Lord would just encourage them in what they're wrestling with.
Yeah, so this leads me into a question that I have about some of the unseen sacrifices that you've found in the missionaries that you've worked with over the years, or things that you see that sort of linger on the field that don't necessarily translate back home. But I want to sort of start with that question with talking about specifically the isolation that a lot of missionaries experience. I had a mentor one time tell me before I left, she said, whatever you think your like biggest, deepest, hardest sin struggle is here, multiply it by 100, and that will be your sin problem on the field. Because now you don't have the benefit of a Christian community and a church and a Bible study and all of these people supporting you. You are now the support for a bunch of people who don't know Jesus yet. And that put the fear of God in me. I was like, oh no. And then it was so true. It was so hard to navigate that aspect of my faith in my life. And then the pressure of like, but I'm supposed to be a missionary. Like I'm supposed to have this figured out. And not knowing how to be honest with my supporters and say like, hey, I need way more prayer than you think I need.
And for reasons that may surprise you.
Yes. So I want to speak to that isolation and just sort of pull the curtain back on like we tend to say like, oh, it must be so hard to miss Christmas and not be able to come home for a wedding, and those things are hard. They are, and they're their own burdens and scars, certainly, but they, I think, look different than sort of the everyday just like slugging it out on the field realities of sacrifice. So with that kind of framing in mind, what would you say are some of the unseen sacrifices of missionaries?
Well, I'll speak to the struggle just as you were talking. What came to mind for me was I grew up Baptist and in like a Southern Baptist culture where, I walked the aisle at 9, was baptized 2 or 3 years later, didn't know if I really meant it or if I was really saved. And, at youth camp, raising my hand again and just like wrestling with what we would call assurance of salvation, So we launched to the mission field. Now think about this. I'm a missionary, the person who's supposed to be carrying the gospel somewhere, just as a reminder. And, and I'm on the mission field 3 months in, like doubting my salvation. And I confide in my wife and I'm like, I don't even know if I'm a Christian. Like I want to be a Christian. I think I love Jesus. I don't know if he loves me back, And she's like, John, I know you. I know you're saved. She was so compassionate during that time. But Maggie, who do you call? Do you call the missions agency that sent you? I was like, hey, yeah, this is John. You just recently sent me as Christ ambassador to Latin America. And I don't know if I'm a Christian. Do you call your sending church pastor? Like, who do you call? And so you're wrestling with I was wrestling with assurance, and I wrestled with that truthfully for years until I moved back to the States and God did something amazing in my life to put that at rest. But it was years of struggle, and you don't feel like you can call me. I mean, other missionaries, you talk about the secret sin. It is something about stress that drives us to cope with it. And so, I mean, for some men, it's pornography habits that they thought they had conquered as part of their story that flare up on the field. And then think about how isolating that is, and walking with marriages that are falling apart. And it's like, we can't tell people because we're missionaries. And so that's even a little bit of a lie that the devil tells us, like, you can't tell people, you can't tell anybody, like, you're supposed to be perfect, you're supposed to be something. And it's like people are wrestling and struggling just to make it, and the added pressure of being spiritual superheroes. And it's like, goodness, it is a huge battle. So like that, pulling back the curtain on, like, man, sin I thought I conquered, I thought I was a Christian, and just like all of these things. Well, come to find out, Maggie, I'm at a conference 4 or 5 years ago with other agency CEOs, and they're saying, yeah, we actually train our people that 8 months to 9 months on the field is about when you start feeling like you're not saved. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second. Nobody told me this. So I walk up to him in the food line. Vern was his name. I'm like, Vern, why didn't anybody tell me this? He's like, oh yeah, we train this in training. I'm like, man, I wish I'd heard this in training. Then I could have called somebody, Anyway, but like, that's so hard. You feel so alone and trapped.
Yeah, which is exactly where the enemy wants you. So I guess to sort of round this out, what would be, as we encourage churches to stay compassionate, how can they help come alongside a missionary that, everything is all sunshine and rainbows in the newsletter, and so we aren't sure if there's more going on, and maybe there isn't. I mean, I would say, like, the darkest, heaviest, hardest season of my faith on the field. Also, the richest, sweetest, best time of my faith on the field. So it's not that, like, every missionary is, like, hiding some deep, dark secret. Because I think the Lord really blesses his servants and really walks with them nearly and tangibly and sweetly. So, like, I don't want to paint this picture that, like, surprise, every missionary is living a double life.
They're all terrible. They're not even Christians.
I don't think that at all. But if we have a church listening that's going, man, we've never dug in deeper. We don't know if we've ever asked those questions. How would you encourage that church to say, like, hey, maybe just lean in a bit here?
Yeah. So the idea of the safe place, we wrestle with this a little bit as an organization because we have missionary care people, but there's still that conflict of interest feeling of, like, if I tell this person who has a Global Outreach International logo, at least subconsciously, what are they going to do with that? And so that, I would just say to the church, the missionary feels this, like, man, if I say the wrong thing, I might get pulled off the field. I have had missionaries say that to me, John, I don't want to tell you this because I'm worried you're going to pull us off the field, because that's like one of the biggest fears is, like, can I be vulnerable and not lose my job, my calling, my spiritual call? Like, that is a lot of pressure. And so, I would say, as a church, your pastor, your missions pastor might never be the safest of safe places for that reason, but build the relationship and provide resources. So we as an organization, we have the missionary care people. We are building relationships with counselors that do not work for us, that do not have any sort of temptation of ethical obligation, so that missionary, so you could, I think it's good for anybody to be working with a counselor at any time. That's been my experience, just generally, but especially missionaries in that setting. You could pay for it. You can make those resources available to make sure they have a safe place to work through the things that they're going through. When they're stateside, paying for a debrief. MTI is one out in Colorado Springs area. A train in Joplin, Missouri. There's plenty of them. Alongside in Michigan, there are ministries that are built to help them have a safe place that's not tied to their organization, that's not tied to their church, to debrief that as a whole family and help them understand what they're going through and develop a plan for moving forward. And so that's a big thing that we've tried to push in recent years is, hey, church, would you please make this investment? Because the missionary feels bad coming and asking for $5,000 for counseling or a week-long debrief for their family, or $10,000 or whatever it costs. And that's one, I would say to a church, that's one of the best investments you can make in the longevity of that family. So the idea of the safe place, the church isn't always going to be that because of, I don't want to lose my job. So you have to go third party. So make those relationships. And I'm sure you guys have a list of recommendations and we can provide that as well.
Yeah, I actually was just going to say, if you're listening to this in Canada and you're like, awesome, we're not going to go to Colorado, I would encourage you to reach out to the More Network in Canada or Outreach Canada. Those are both organizations that they have fantastic member care available. So if you have questions, reach out to the More Network Canada. With that kind of piece for the sending churches, which is primarily who we speak to, sort of tied up, I do want to just turn briefly here. I know that we have some phenomenal missionaries who listen in onto this podcast. And we want to recognize and celebrate. Thank you so much for your obedience and your sacrifices and the ways that you are going above and beyond the call to serve our Lord. We're grateful for you. And John, I'm wondering if you have anything to say to them as they navigate these relationships with their sending churches. Just sort of close us out here.
Yeah, absolutely. I spent a lot of time on the field feeling like, man, I wish my church would. Or, I just saw the missions pastor go to one of their other mission sites, or, there's a little bit, and I've had to grow out of my pity me mentality and understand, how can I be the protagonist of this story, And so understanding, hey, you have a lot on your shoulders, missionary. We love you. We're proud of you. Here's my advice. If you feel like your church is not engaging in the way or communicating the way you would like, model that behavior to them. So do you wish they'd reach out to you and ask you how it's going? Reach out to the pastor and ask how it's going. Reach out to the missions pastor, whoever your connection is, your former Sunday school teachers. Hey, how can we be praying for you guys? What's going on at church? What are you guys studying right now? All the things you want to see, because that will help encourage reciprocity. I know I would listen to our pastor's sermons just to have something in English and feel like you talk about not having your community, have some sort of spiritual resource, while I was on the field, and take notes and reach out to him. It's like, man, I listened to your sermon. This was awesome. Thank you so much. When they have their vision night and they're saying, hey, this is what we're doing this year, write down what they're hoping for and pray for those things, and text them on occasion. Say, I'm praying for this event coming up. I'm praying for the church to do this. I'm so proud of you guys. And so there's an opportunity for us to model what we're hoping for to the church, and it will make a difference. It absolutely will. So that's one of the biggest things I see, Maggie, sometimes when I'm talking to missionaries. I'm like, man, people just don't, whatever their complaints. I'm like, okay, are you doing that for them? And start there and trust that God can use that to do something both ways in that relationship.
If this conversation really resonated for someone and they want more guidance on how to reach out to their missionaries more effectively or care for them better, how could they get in touch with you? Is there a way to sort of ask the expert?
Sure. Don't call me an expert, no. We have suffered much together, Maggie. We have much to share. That's what I always tell. I can tell you stories. So, yeah. So on LinkedIn is probably the best place where I share a lot of stories from the field. I'm talking about, hey, I'm writing about, I didn't know if I was a Christian, all those sorts of things. So John Darnell III, the number 3 RD, John Darnell III on LinkedIn. And you can find out more about Global Outreach, GOI.org.
Perfect. John, thank you so much for being with us today. This has been just a pleasure. Thank you for your input, and thanks for joining us on the Global Missions Podcast.
Thank you for your heart for missionaries and your heart for the church. It was a joy to be here.
Thanks for listening. If you were encouraged by today's episode, don't forget to rate and review us to help others find our program. To connect with our team, find all of our past episodes and other resources, visit globalmissionstoolbox.com/podcast. Join us again soon to continue exploring this grand adventure of being Christ's witnesses to the ends of the earth.